The night was quiet, the stars scattered like tiny diamonds across the velvet sky. Under the dim light of the countryside, Diep sat beside the wooden fence, her hands gently brushing the small tomato plants she had just planted. The air smelled of soil and dew, a scent that brought her peace, simple, pure, and full of life. James stood behind her, his white shirt slightly wrinkled after a long day of travel. He watched her in silence, captivated not by the plants or the land, but by the quiet strength she carried. She was not like anyone he had ever met, not the businesswoman in his city, not the investors who surrounded him. Diep's world was simple, yet it had something his world lacked: sincerity. James Diep turned, smiling. "You don't belong here. You have meetings, suits, and fancy dinners. Why spend your night watching someone plant tomatoes?" James chuckled softly, leaning against the wooden post. "Because maybe this is where I find something money can't buy." Diep laughed. "And what could that be?" He looked at her, eyes calm yet deep. "Peace. And maybe you." Her smile faded for a second, replaced by a blush that glowed under the moonlight. "You always know how to say things that make people believe you." "I don't want you to just believe," James replied. "I want to prove it. One day, when I've earned my place again, when I've built something real, I'll come back here, Diep, and I'll marry you." His voice carried a promise, soft yet steady, like a seed planted deep in the ground. Diep looked at him, unsure if she should laugh or cry. She had heard promises before, from people who swore they would never leave, from those who claimed love was forever, and yet, most of them vanished with time. But something about the way James said it made her heart tremble. The next morning, he left early, driving away in his black car toward the city skyline. Diep stood at the gate, watching the dust rise behind him. He didn't look back, but she knew he carried her heart with him. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. James' life once again drowned in numbers, contracts, and meetings. The city's bright lights replaced the moonlit nights he once shared with Diep. But her image, her soft voice, her gentle eyes, and the scent of earth on her hands lingered in his memory. Every time he faced a challenge, he remembered that night and his promise. "When I have $1 million, I'll marry you." It wasn't just a romantic vow. It was his motivation, his driving force, his way of connecting the ruthless world of business with the tender warmth of love. Back in the countryside, Diep continued her simple life. She harvested vegetables, sold them at the market, and cared for little Nee, the child she and James had been looking after. Every evening, she would glance at the horizon, wondering if James was eating well, sleeping enough, or still thinking about her. Sometimes she whispered to herself, one promise to fates. "I wonder which one will win, love or ambition." She didn't know that, far away, James was asking himself the exact same question. Months turned into a year, and James's world had changed entirely. The man who once lost everything was now standing again, stronger, sharper, and hungrier than ever. His company was growing fast. Contracts were being signed, investors were calling, and his face began to reappear in business magazines. But every success came with a cost. Late nights stretched into dawns, and every decision carried the weight of millions. James's father, once proud of his achievements, began to pressure him again. "Son, if you want to truly be respected," his father said during a tense dinner, "you must close this deal. It's worth $10 million, but you'll have to move production to another country. Forget those small farms. That girl in the countryside, she doesn't belong in our world." James froze, the fork in his hand trembling slightly. "That girl," he said quietly, "is the reason I'm still standing. If not for her, I would have given up long ago." His father's face hardened. "Love doesn't pay the bills. You want to build a family, then build an empire first." Those words echoed in James's mind for nights. He couldn't sleep. The deal was everything he had worked for, the final step toward his $1 million goal. Yet the thought of betraying the values Diep taught him honesty, simplicity, and compassion made his heart ache. Meanwhile, in the countryside, Diep was struggling too. The small vegetable business she ran with the locals was barely surviving. Prices were dropping, storms had destroyed crops, and she could feel the exhaustion deep in her bones. But she never complained. Every time she looked at Nee, who now ran to school in her tiny red shoes, Diep reminded herself that James's promise still lived, even if only in her heart. One evening, as rain poured heavily outside, Diep sat by the window, mending Nee's school uniform. Her phone buzzed, a message from James. "Diep, I'm close. Just one more deal. Then I'll come back." Her fingers stopped moving. She stared at the message, tears filling her eyes. She wanted to reply, "I miss you. I don't need your money. Just come home." But her pride held her back. She simply typed, "I'll wait. Just don't lose yourself." In the city, James was standing in a high-rise office, rain splattering against the glass. He read her message again and again. For a moment, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. He took a deep breath, turned off his phone, and signed the contract that could change everything. But fate has its own way of testing love. The next week, one of his business partners betrayed him. The contract was fake, the investment a trap. James lost millions overnight. His company's accounts were frozen. His reputation shattered. The media called it the fall of a rising star. For the first time in years, James sat alone in his office, staring at the empty screen of his laptop. All the promises he made, all the dreams he built, seemed to crumble like dust. And in that silence, he whispered to himself, "I just wanted to be worthy of her." He looked at the ring he had secretly bought months ago, the one he meant to give Diep when he reached his goal. He clenched it tightly in his palm. The metal felt cold, just like his heart at that moment. "Maybe," he said softly, "the million-dollar dream was never the challenge. Maybe the real challenge was keeping love alive when the world falls apart." And somewhere far away, in the small house lit by a single oil lamp, Diep looked out into the rain, her heart quietly, whispering his name. The morning James left the city was quiet, too quiet for a man who had once lived surrounded by phones ringing, engines roaring, and deals being made every second. Now, his world had gone still. The empire he fought so hard to rebuild had collapsed overnight, taking with it every bit of pride he once had. He drove for hours until the tall buildings faded into green fields, and the sound of traffic gave way to the gentle rustle of leaves. The familiar scent of soil and rain filled his lungs. For the first time in months, he felt alive, not powerful, not rich, just alive. When he reached Diep's home, it was dusk. The golden light from the small window flickered like a candle of hope. He stood at the gate, hesitant, his clothes wrinkled, his face weary. Through the open door, he saw Diep sitting by the table, helping little Nee with her homework. The laughter inside was pure, untouched by ambition or disappointment. He wanted to walk in, to hold them both, to tell them how sorry he was. But his voice was caught in his throat. Nee looked up first. "Uncle James," she shouted, her small feet running toward him. Diep turned around, startled, when she saw him standing there, soaked, exhausted, but smiling faintly. Her eyes widened. "James?" He nodded, his voice soft. "I told you I'd come back." Diep stood frozen for a moment before slowly walking toward him. The years of pain, distance, and waiting melted away with every step. When she finally stood before him, she didn't ask about money or success. She just asked, "Are you all right?" James smiled weakly. "I failed, Diep. The deal fell apart. I lost everything again." She shook her head. "Not everything. You're here, James, and that means everything." He couldn't hold it anymore. His tears fell, mixing with the raindrops on his face. "I promised you a house, a future. I wanted to make you proud." Diep reached out, taking his hand. "You already did. You taught me that love isn't built from money. It's built from moments like this." Inside, Nee tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle James, don't cry. You can stay here with us. We have soup tonight." That innocent voice broke what was left of his sorrow. James knelt down, hugging the little girl tightly. For the first time in months, he laughed, a deep, honest laugh that came from his soul. That night, the three of them sat together on the small wooden floor, sharing a simple meal: rice, soup, and a few vegetables from Diep's garden. No million-dollar table, no crystal glasses, no sound of success, just warmth, laughter, and peace after dinner. Diep brought out an old oil lamp. The glow gently lit their faces as the night grew deeper. James looked at her and whispered, "Maybe this was the house I was meant to build all along. Not one made of walls and bricks, but one made of love and people who never gave up on me." Diep smiled through her tears, "And this is the home I waited for." Outside, the rain finally stopped. The stars peeked through the clouds, as if the universe itself was smiling at them. It was in that moment James realized he had lost his fortune, but he had found his life again. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently through the thin curtains, casting a golden hue across the small house. James opened his eyes to the sound of laughter coming from outside. Through the window, he saw Diep hanging wet clothes under the morning sun while little Nee chased butterflies around the garden. It was such a simple scene, yet something about it made James's chest ache in the best way possible. This, he realized, was the dream he had been too blind to see. Not the skyscrapers, not the boardrooms, not the applause of strangers, but this peace, warmth, and the sound of love filling the air. He walked outside, his hands still rough from months of failure and rebuilding, and joined Diep by the garden. "You woke up early," he said softly. Diep turned, smiling. "Someone has to make sure the vegetables don't get eaten by chickens." James chuckled, taking the basket from her hands. "Then let me help. I owe this garden a lot already." As they worked side by side, Diep spoke quietly. "Do you ever miss it, James? The city, the company, all the things you used to have?" He paused, thinking for a moment before answering. "I used to think those things made me strong. But after losing everything, I realized strength isn't about what you own. It's about who stands by you when you have nothing." Diep looked at him tenderly. "And who stands by you now?" He smiled. "You and Nee." From inside the house, Nee's small voice called out, "Mom, Dad, breakfast is ready." James froze for a second, the word Dad echoing in his heart. Diep noticed the way his eyes softened, the way his breath caught. Nee had never called him that before. They walked back inside, where Nee proudly placed 3 bowls of porridge on the table. "I made it myself," she said with a grin. James sat down and took a small bite, pretending to think seriously. Tastes like love," he said. Nee laughed, clapping her hands, and Diep smiled. For that moment, everything was perfect. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, James began to rebuild, not a business empire this time, but a humble agricultural project with Diep. Together, they grew vegetables, sold crops to local markets, and taught Nee the value of hard work and honesty. Every nail James hammered into the new shed, every seed Diep planted into the soil, carried a story not of ambition, but of redemption. They were no longer chasing millions, they were chasing meaning. Sometimes, at sunset, they would sit on the small porch, their hands intertwined, watching Nee draw pictures in the dirt. James would whisper, "You know, Diep, maybe we didn't need to conquer the world. Maybe all we needed was to build our own." And Diep, resting her head on his shoulder, would reply softly, "We already did." In the distance, the wind carried the faint scent of blooming flowers, the scent of hope, of second chances, of love that had endured through storms and failures. For James, the man who once stood on the top of the world, and for Diep, the woman who taught him what truly mattered, life had come full circle. They had fallen, lost, and broken apart, yet love had pieced them back together. And under that golden Vietnamese sky, with laughter echoing and hearts finally at peace, James realized the $1 million dream had never been money, it had always been them.